Karen Otis-Webb studio and her writing, speaking, and even podcasting, Karen has become a voice for women in design, those just starting out, those balancing client meetings with pickups of the kiddos and getting kids to camp, and even those looking to realign their purpose with their practice. She reminds us that the skills women bring to the table and to our industry that tends to be so complicated and challenging, that those women bring resilience and empathy, multitasking, and those essential strengths that we all need to pull off a great project. So Karen's philosophy is called Life Beautifully Built, and it's more than about architecture. It's about designing lives with the same creativity and care that we all bring to our projects. So please join me in giving Karen Otis-Webb a warm welcome.
Thank you. Hello. Well, I figure we'll get one thing right out of the gate, one thing straight. Yes, my name is Karen, and I am very well aware it has come to be synonymous with someone who wants to speak to your manager. But I am super lucky today because it looks like I have a whole room full. So thank you. All right, let's start with a story I have for you. So imagine a bar, heavily varnished, dark wood, seen lots of celebrations, blind dates, chance meetings, you know the type, dim lighting, and sultry jazz music playing. And at the bar, there sits Coco. Coco sits with her back very straight at the bar. She's got one leg crossed over the other, and she's revealing exquisite stilettos that make her legs look like they go on for days. Coco sits there. She's got a espresso brown dress, sleek, luxurious, with just a hint of shimmer, and sort of smooth velvet and soft lighting. And Coco's the type of woman that you can tell does not just glide into a room. She absolutely smoothly walks in on an air of sexual allure and a breeze of sarcasm. She sits at the bar drinking one of my faves, chocolate martini, perfectly chilled. Her fingers laced around it like it's a familiar lover. Coco kissed rim on it. And she sits at the bar just looking around. She doesn't look for attention, but attention always seems to find her. Then in comes PB. He goes by his initials. He is bold, loud, proud. He shoves open the bar door and he stands there, and he's dressed completely differently. He's wearing a blazer that is like begging to be ironed, and he's got sneakers on with a hole forming at his left toe. He bounds in the room and he goes to the bar. I need a drink. I want something with flavor, something unforgettable. And the bartender kind of rolls his eyes and thinks, oh, it's going to be one of those kind of nights, right? And he goes ahead and he makes him a Nutty Professor cocktail. Ever had one of those? No? Oh, they're good. Anyway, so PB takes his drink and takes a sip, and then he scans the room. And that's when he spots Coco. And he thinks to himself, I gotta meet her. So he kind of straightens out his blazer, which just wrinkles it even more. And he saunters over, kind of like a golden retriever who's just spotted like a tasty fillet. He's gonna swagger on over and give her his opening line, right? So he goes on over and he leans against the bar, like right there where she is. And he says, I couldn't help but notice you. So are you always this smooth, or is it the lighting? Well, Coco takes a slow sip of her martini. She kind of looks him up and down and looks at his drink and says, I'm always this velvety smooth. She says, but you look a little nutty. You're the kind of nutty that my daddy used to call a few almonds short of a trail mix. So now he's really intrigued, right? He's hooked. And he proceeds to kind of move in a little closer because he's so excited to meet her and he really is dying to impress her. And as he does that, with too much flair of his gesturing, I mean, he is kind of nutty as it is, right? So he hits her glass and half his drink splashes right into hers. I do need the remote. Here it is. Half splashes right into hers. He looks horrified, and he's like, oh my God, it's not what I wanted to happen, and he's trying to mop up the mess with a little cocktail napkin. Coco just takes a slow sip. She looks at this new concoction in her drink, and she takes a slow sip. And she says, you know, it's actually quite nice. And she says, I think I like it. And she gives him a provocative wink. PB proceeds to take the drink too, takes a sip, and he's like, you're right, this isn't half bad. And just like that, Coco and PB realized something. They started out completely different, two very, very different people. Started out completely different. Coco is sleek, refined. PB, well, he's kind of crunchy chaos in a blazer. And when they came together, though, when his drink collides with hers, was the result a ruined drink? Maybe. Or maybe it was the beginning of something magical, because this unexpected combo worked. They couldn't have expected it, but somehow it worked. When two elements, different elements, come together, they don't stay unchanged. They don't lose their individual identity. Instead, what happens is they transform. Something in one amplifies something in the other. And the result is better than the two would have been on their own, better than the sum of its parts. That is what we call juxtaposition. Hold on. Okay, juxtaposition. What starts as conflict quickly becomes chemistry. What starts as tension becomes balance. And in that, in the space between harmony and conflict, what you have is the breeding ground for creativity. That's where creativity thrives. It's the juxtaposition of the two that makes it bigger than each part on its own. Juxtaposition in architecture and in interior design breeds creative richness. So what once was familiar becomes fresh. What was once singular is now layered, and the space between them is where creativity will thrive and create something much bigger. In this, for example, the light against shadow, the rough stone against the smoothly sanded wood. Context is created by contrast, and in that, it breathes new life into both. You could see each material separately, but as we know as designers, when you bring the two together, something different happens, and that juxtaposition makes you see them differently than you would have had they not been. So the tension between the different materials does not dilute their essence. If anything, it enhances it and amplifies it. It's not uncomfortable conflict. It is beautiful synergy. And in that synergy, something exceptional is born. That is where beauty deepens, complexity emerges, and innovation takes flight. It's really the art of connection, of connecting two different things. In that art of connection, we are intentionally bringing them together, not to create something uniform, but to create something exceptional. Beauty is found in the contrast. Architecture is essentially a sum of its parts. In this, for example, the strength and the linear strength of the stairs and the rail play off of the delicate spheres that are floating in the space above. One is firmly rooted to the ground, and the other one is suspended in flight. And it's that contrast which makes the space more interesting than if each was on its own. Architecture is that sum of parts. It's all coming together: form, function, creativity, and vision. You cannot have one without the other. If you were to just solely have something that if you solely focused on aesthetics, we know that you might have a stunning building, but it may not be efficient or functional for your client. However, same is true with the opposite. If you have a building that is just practical and functional, that might be great, but you're missing the inspiration. So this is what really architecture teaches us. This is one of the lessons it teaches us, right? So when different parts work together, we build something extraordinary. Okay, that little icon right there, that little dialogue icon, that's where you guys get to help me out, all right? As we're getting later in the day, it's always helpful to do. So I'm going to take the part in white, you guys take the part in black, and we will anchor that part or this concept home before moving on to some others. When different parts work together,
we build something extraordinary.
Not great. One more time. When different parts work together,
we build something extraordinary.
Nice, very, very nice. Exactly. And the key is this. It shows us that differences are a strength. However, when we apply that to gender differences in the workplace, we get into a problem. Because somewhere along the line, society got it wrong. They gave us this notion that in order for men and women to be equal, we had to be the same. We had to show up at work with the same way to approach problems, same way of showing up, same way of thinking or style of thinking, that there was only one way, and everybody needed to comply with that in order for us to be able to work together. When women first came into the workforce a long time ago, we were supposed to emulate men, right? So you all remember the power suit, we had the shoulder pads that were like a linebacker, right? Just to give us, so basically the look was, look like men, show no figure, and just, emulate the men. But the problem comes in. The problem is that nothing, if we've learned this lesson, that when different parts work together, that's when the extraordinary is built, then that doesn't work. So, and the reason it is especially something that doesn't work when we all just emulate one gender, especially in our creative fields, because sameness in everything, this is kind of a general rule, but sameness stifles creativity and sameness sabotages that synergy. And those are really the two cornerstones of our industry. We need that creativity, we need that synergy. That is what creates innovation, amazing projects, something you've never seen before. That's where it really thrives. And though society continues to think that we're the same, or we should be the same, or now even we're genderless, or we are interchangeable, I'm here to tell you we're not. Studies were done at Stanford evaluating the brains of men and women, okay? And they were looking to see, are there visible differences in the way our brains are made up? Because this whole conversation has gotten so intense about gender. So they started to really take a look at that. And here are some of the things that they found. One, men and women are definitely different. And we'll break down what they are. They saw visible differences in the brain. For women, we're better at multitasking. That's just a given. Locating an object in a visual field, more empathic, and they could tell because these are the portions of the brain that lights up, etc. More empathic. Women have a better memory of faces. Don't know why, but we do. And our two hemispheres are interconnected left and right. So there's a lot of pathways left and right. And that really helps us with some of the multitasking, etc. Men, on the other hand, completely different. Their brains are singular task focus is really their strength, better memory of things rather than faces. They experience way more powerful sexual jealousy. I heard a in the in the audience. They can rotate. They have are better skilled at rotating a dimensional object in their mind. And their brains, male brains, are wired more front to back regions. They don't have the same channels this way. Theirs are to two different regions, front to back. So we can see that there definitely are differences. These make sense because historically women were the gatherers and caregivers, right? So who's had the joy, the pleasure of watching a toddler for a day? Okay, so it might have looked something like this, right? Finally, you've got to just pick up the toddler because you've been chasing that toddler around everywhere and you're like, for God's sakes, I can get nothing done. You got to hold the toddler, right? Then you're busy, I don't know, you got the casserole in the oven, you're emptying the dishwasher, and you've got a rag on the floor and your foot's cleaning up what the dog just threw up, right? So that's kind of a typical day with the toddler. I'm sure many of us have been there. I have a long time ago. But that is why, and you can tell at that day, if you didn't know it at the beginning of the day, you certainly knew by the end of the day that you had to do one heck of a job at multitasking. Men, on the other hand, historically, were always the hunters. So they needed and had that singular focus so that they could target the prey. And that's how our brains kind of evolved. Studies were also done on masculine and feminine energies. So we're all vibrational beings, and we have a combination of both in each of us. I have masculine and feminine, so do you, everybody does. However, typically one is more dominant. And there are some big differences. Feminine energy is intuitive, collaborative, it's nurturing, it's based on compassion, empathy, and creativity. Those are part of what make up the feminine energy. Masculine energy, completely different, is assertive, competitive, it's based on logic, it's rational, it's protective, and it's based on linear thinking. Between these and the cognitive differences, they were surprised by how striking our differences really are. That it's in our DNA, it's in our biology. These are the differences that we have. And it makes a difference when men and women show up in the workplace. So, women will tend to show up with the intuitive thinking, more interrelational understanding, and a kind of connective, collaborative energy that tends to see the whole picture. Men in the workplace generally show up with that singular task focus. They're really able to kind of hone in on something. They have a natural drive to compete and conquer, and those are completely different ways to show up. So how do we, when we bring that, these of course are not hard and fast rules. There's always some exceptions to nature, but for the most part, how do we then blend these when we try to have a team that is really effective, but has to be able to work together? That's really the question. And the key is, as managers and leaders, when we stop asking one side to conform to the other, men to conform to women or women to men, when we stop asking them to do that and instead create a space where both can authentically collaborate, they can both authentically be involved, that is the biggest difference. And that right there is where the result is electric. When you allow them to each be who they are and you bring that together, that is really where the electricity comes in. That's where we can create something so exceptional. So a bridge is really, let's talk about a bridge for a moment, because when we're looking at these two differences, right, the strengths that men bring, the strengths that women bring, how do we deal with the two? A bridge is a great example, a design example for what to do when two forces are coming together, okay? And they can be opposing forces, they typically are. So how do you do that? How do you handle it? And let's take a look at how a bridge is built, how a bridge functions. So a bridge isn't just a structure. It's a breathtaking balancing act. It's bringing together beauty and utility. Every arch, beam, cable, girder, every one of them plays a different role. Some support, some stretch, some resist, and some will flex. It works because of its contrasts, not in spite of them. Without those opposing forces coming together, it would fall flat and collapse. A bridge is also not just a way to get from one side to another to cross, right? It's a masterful fusion of opposites. And this is where architecture can start to help us understand how does it work when these two forces come together. How can we apply that to gender differences in the workplace? Because it still is an issue. I mean, I don't know if you know, but even in 2025, I mean, I'm an architect, and in 2025, the percentage that are women is 17%. That is so low in this day and age still. And it's interesting because in school, it's not like that. In academia, it was 50-50. When I went a long time ago, it was 50% men, 50% women, but that's not what the actual workforce tends to support. So there is a problem there, and that is because there's just, the two genders have a hard time functioning in that arena, especially when you get architects, designers, builders, and contractors. And sometimes that is where the tension comes from, that is not balanced. So a bridge then, every element in it is a balance and a conversation between artistic intention and structural necessity. And you'll have forces pulling and pushing, but together they hold strong, and that is how they keep the structure standing, stable, and stunning. But what happens when the forces are not balanced? What happens if these opposing forces either are not all taken into account or not balanced? Well, that is when it's a catastrophe. Let me tell you about the Tacoma Narrows Bridge in Washington State. In Washington State, this bridge was built. It took 2 years to construct this bridge, and on July 1st, 1940, it opened. And it was, a big, big to-do because it was really a testament to human achievement. It was the third longest suspension bridge in America, and it proudly crossed the Puget Sound, bringing together the Olympic Peninsula and the mainland of Washington State. They called the bridge the Galloping Gertie because she had this kind of way of moving, which I know, this is shocking, but especially as builders and architects, she had this way of moving where she would literally kind of undulate. And people came from all over to see Gertie because as you're driving, it looked like the car in front of you was falling, like would disappear. So they came from everywhere, and they thought it was strange, but no one worried. I mean, after all, she was designed and engineered to stand strong until November 7th, just 4 months after Gertie opened. On that day, there was a wind, only 40-mile-per-hour wind, not outrageous, not a hurricane, not even a huge storm. But on that day, that wind found Gertie's weakness. As the wind started, Gertie started to act even more strangely. She started to twist. She started to ripple. She started to writhe like a ribbon in the breeze. And though they had already taken into account the forces, they had not really taken into account how tension, compression, and air movement were going to really work together. So each of those little movements kind of built upon themselves. Right? They started kind of multiplying upon themselves, getting worse and worse and worse. And this invisible battle became so fierce that Gertie tore herself apart, cables snapped, and she plunged into the icy waters below. I'm going to show you this, I think if we can, because this is a documentary. It's just a minute long, but it's interesting. Let's see if. Did it? We just had it earlier. Okay, no problem. We'll come back. That's fine. Okay, so you can imagine the collapse. Okay, thankfully we have a room full of good imaginations. So hopefully you'll see it because it is shocking. I mean, when I first saw it, I thought, this is insane. So, but here's the big eye opener. This is something. Now we're getting into bringing this into a lesson for us all to know is that just like that bridge, without balance, our work teams, the teams that we have in our offices, on our job sites, just like the bridge, our work teams can collapse in the same catastrophic way. When we don't balance strength with flexibility, when we don't balance boldness with nuance, when we don't temper the two, and we don't balance creativity with structure, the result can be just as catastrophic, because we need to balance all of them to create teams that then will stand strong. So in essence, a bridge, really, with all of its opposing forces, is really a perfect metaphor for collaboration. If we design like a bridge and we have the different forces complement rather than compete, then when they come together, that is how we make teams that will stand strong. And this is crucial, not just in your boardroom, your design studio, your office, but also on the job site. Because when architects and designers, builders and contractors work together in a way that is collaborative, they work together in harmony, the result is really a beautifully orchestrated build, right? Hopefully we've all had that when it's a project that goes together seamlessly. So you have the creative intention and you've got the practical execution, and they're coming together seamlessly because the team is working in harmony. And your whole team is not going to all be the same. You're going to have those different personalities, those different energies. So for it to come together seamlessly really takes a collaborative work culture. But what happens when it doesn't work that way, right? When we have the group that isn't working harmoniously, right? Then it's less symphony, more circus, and you're juggling egos and you're putting out fires, and it's kind of a mess, and I'm sure we've all been there, and it's no fun. The key is, as managers and leaders and entrepreneurs, when we stop expecting that everyone needs to be the same and has to operate in the same way, and we build like a bridge, that's when we really start doing more than just traversing this gap, and we start to build exceptional teams. Because the key is, the power is in the mix. You need the detail keepers and the dreamers. You need the intuitive thinkers and the linear thinkers. You need that entire thing. The power is in the mix. So if we're trying to create strong teams, we need to keep that in mind. And in that mix, the key is to let each do what it does best, right? Whatever it does best, that's what it should do, because now you're pulling in a bunch of different ideologies, a bunch of different ways of thinking, ways of processing information, ways of decision making, and the tension between them is really just what's holding it together. It's not a tension that is going to create the conflict. And this is really where gender differences come into play. What we need to see is that these gender differences are not a hurdle to overcome. They're actually the powerhouse of innovation for us, because gender differences can really be that secret weapon where it's what's going to allow you to come up with a very strong synergy that's going to bring new innovation. So let's talk for a minute about managing a design firm. So managing a design firm is very different from managing a factory, assembly line, or even any other kind of office. Because on those, you're overseeing repeatable tasks, right? But we don't really even oversee tasks. In a design firm, it's not about overseeing the tasks. It's actually about really guiding people's visions. And that's really different. You're managing creativity, and creativity doesn't have a checklist. It's not linear thinking. It's messy, and it's emotional, and it's very, very personal. So managing that takes a very different type of leadership. It requires a leadership style that's less about command and control and much more about collaboration and flexibility. And as leaders, we want to encourage that voice and vision from everybody at the table, because that's really how we're going to get the best possible team. I love this line because it's so absolutely true. You really do need the whole palette to create the masterpiece. You can't have a team full of same thinkers to create anything extraordinary. It's going to be kind of the status quo. And to really challenge that status quo, we should be engaging in bringing different types of designers, creators, and then having that become a nice harmonic union. So, is collecting all these people, this diverse variety of people, of talents and ways of thinking, is that enough? Does that ensure us to really be successful? Is that enough right there? And it's not. I'll tell you, if we as managers brought in all these different types and were to like sit back and be like, okay, let's see what happens. Well, I can tell you, it's going to be chaos, and it's going to be conflict, and everyone's going to be, just vying for that place or attention or to get their thoughts heard, etc. So the key as a manager is to cement the different parts together, to really cement it with a solid work culture. And this is where all of you come in, because it's up to us to create that work culture, a work culture that promotes collaboration instead of conflict. And we're going to get into exact ways to do that very soon here. So that's really where great leadership comes from. So great leadership builds the steady, stable, and strong foundation for that bridge to stand tall. So you cannot just bring in the variety of talent. You also have to have a work culture that is accepting and values these differences and knows how to make them work together in a unique way. When we do that, not only do we create a great team, but we empower our teams. We empower them to innovate with confidence and to soar to new heights of creativity that they normally wouldn't have. It transforms groups of individuals, right? You've got a group of individuals in your firm. It transforms that into one cohesive force, pushing in the same direction, even though everybody is bringing their own individual talents and strengths to the table. So how do you do that? How can we go from being a good manager to a great manager? Well, one is you take the one-size-fits-all rule book and throw that out because it doesn't. That's the first. You listen louder than you think. You have to listen much louder and talk less loudly, okay? It's really about that. You need to, you don't manage architects and designers, you unleash them. You don't micromanage creativity, you add imagination. You fuel that. And you appreciate and celebrate all the ideas, even in their early, awkward, and kind of half-baked state, right? Because you need to create that environment where everybody feels comfortable to bring up those ideas, to bring up those thoughts that maybe, that hadn't thought of before, they're not sure how it's going to land. It's up to you to create the culture that it will land nicely, because we are eager to hear those and we do want to learn from those. Being a good manager really is about, you need to become the safety net that leads people to creative leaps, okay? And the lighthouse that keeps them from drifting too far. So it's a very different way of leading. You're not guiding these tasks, do this, finish, to really bring that excitement, enthusiasm, and new level of creativity to your team. that is how you do it. It's a very different way. And you need to allow for wild ideas to have a soft place to land so that it does feel comfortable to bring up the most outlandish ideas, which really could be your biggest successes. Managing creatives means knowing when to be the scaffolding and when to get out of the way. And again, different way to really manage. Okay, so I have a question for you guys. So with a show of hands, it might be personal, but it's okay. Tell me, with a show of hands, who here loves Reese's peanut butter cups? Right? Yeah, good for you all. Number one candy in America. Can you believe that? Above M&M's. And M&M's is third, Skittles is second. I'm like, what? Okay. But Reese's peanut butter cup, okay? So the chocolate, yum. The peanut butter, yum. The two together, boom. And you have a winning combination, right? And it's about different parts coming together and creating something bigger than they are. The Reese's cup is proof that collaboration between wildly different ingredients isn't just possible, it's deliciously successful. So let's connect some of the dots here. So we started out, we know we've witnessed the magic-ish that happened between PB and Cocoa when they collided, right? We know the amazing taste of the Reese's when things come together. We also saw that beauty comes from the juxtaposition and the contrast in architecture and in interior design. And we also know that if we don't balance the two well, that it can take a whole darn bridge and send it crashing down, which you're using your imagination because you didn't get to see it. But you can Google it if not. Google the Tacoma Narrows Bridge collapse. It's frightening. So we've seen all of those. And so the very key to building anything that's extraordinary, whether it's a business, whether it is a building, or whether it's a kick-ass, bold team of your designers, the key is this. The key is to savor the synergy. Okay, we know what to do, right? So I'm taking the top line. Savor the synergy. Okay, one more time maybe, because that was just like sad, sleepy. Savor the synergy. Exactly, it really is. So as a manager, you have the unique power to ignite synergy in your group. It will literally take, and I've seen it so many times in working with groups, you literally take a group that's working okay, creatively, etc. You bring the synergy by really, and we'll talk about the specific steps in a moment, and it will shift that culture. So not only do you have the power to ignite the synergy and to build influential teams where every employee is heard and every employee feels like they are a distinct piece of the overall puzzle that goes together seamlessly. And you have the ability to shift that culture to appreciate the unique contributions of both men and women. You're doing all of that. You're creating a visionary workplace where employee engagement and retention absolutely skyrockets. Everyone appreciates being heard, and there's a new sort of enthusiasm that evolves, and off the charts business success, because you've just changed the dynamic in your office. Okay, so let's get to, we've talked kind of conceptually. Let's get to, I want you to be able to leave with like actionable steps. What could you do rather than just knowing the overall concept? So we'll look at this. So these are effective management tips that you can put into practice today. So the first one is provide an assessment quiz for your employees, for your team. And you'll be able to grab one off my QR code at the end, one for leaders and one for employees. But do you really know how your team thinks? Do you really know if they're an intuitive thinker or a linear thinker? Do you really know what motivates them, how they are best managed or supervised? You know, what are the things that really make them tick? Knowing those is going to help you know your team better, which will continue to the next one. You'll be able to build teams with complementary strengths. It seems like it would be intuitive to say, oh, no, let's just put everyone the same together, because then we'll have harmony, right? We won't have all this annoying conflict going on. But there is no synergy in that. And so you do need to put together complementary strengths. And then need to tailor mentorship programs. I firmly believe in mentorships, and I actually love them. I have always had employees that come, very young, right out of school. I love that because you can mold them. But mentorship is not only is it valuable for the person being mentored, it's valuable for the entire office. But more than anything, it's a way to give back, right? It's a way to give back because we've already got way more experience than they do, and a way to help. I like to call it pairing. It's like pairing a good wine with a good steak, right? You've got your great red wine on its own, delicious, and then you've got your steak, amazing. Put them together though, and the flavor's more robust. It's all of a sudden much stronger. So that's what you want to do, and that way you'll have better pairing between the two. Problem-solving workshops to ignite your synergy and get people together for that, and then teach collaborative tactics, which we'll get to. But I can already hear some people saying this. Saying like, okay, yeah, Karen, that sounds so great, but now I see a group of all of these people, and I'm thinking, yeah, that might work for you because you don't have like Chad, the combative mansplainer, or you don't have Karen, who is going to give you a 10-minute backstory before getting to a simple yes or no answer. But I have answers for you for that, and we're going to talk about those right now. These are what I like to call behavior flips. So the over-apologizer. These are unhelpful traits over here on the left. Some you might be like, oh, that's me. Some you might be like, oh, I know someone like that. Over-apologizing tends to be a female trait. Everybody hates it, so let's not use sorry so much. You can't be sorry for something that is not in your realm of power. Mansplaining, typically the problem with that is it assumes that the person's like an idiot and knows nothing. So don't assume that. Assume they know or ask. Overconfident bias, they feel like they need nobody else's opinion, and that you need to, as a manager, for that person, you want to have their confidence balanced with curiosity. Joking or minimizing, when it's demeaning, no good. Switch it to a humor that is uplifting. My personal pet peeve is the last one, women judging women really harshly. That's just cattiness, and that comes from insecurity. So don't breed that in your organization. Switch it to a supportive kind of sisterhood. And these all belong in your toolbox because, wait a minute, why did we do that? Right, because then you're going to have lasting results that don't take away, they don't hijack the harmony that you're trying to create. These are the kind of lasting results. Newfound camaraderie and team harmony. Your staff feels recognized, respected, and supported because they are valued. You have effective mentorship because of the pairing, so your staff's always learning. Innovation and creativity soars in that kind of synergy. Employee enthusiasm and retention, which we've talked about, and a company's overall success skyrockets, and your clients and their projects are going to benefit from such vibrant synergy. So back to our Reese's cup, okay, because it really holds the key to it all, and you know what to do. A Reese's cup reminds us, different ingredients, one vision, one unforgettable result. That's the transformational power of having diverse teams. And as architects, designers, and builders, we too transform our world one design at a time, aligning our passion and purpose in the pursuit of greatness and the legacy we hope to leave behind. But if I leave you with any important thought, it's this, that greatness is never a solo act. It's a collaboration. It's a collaboration that's carefully built, a fusion of differences that ignites the extraordinary. If you know of a group that would love to hear this talk, or you want that assessment quiz, grab the QR code right there. And in closing, thank you. Thank you for letting this Karen speak to the manager in you. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Does anybody have any questions for Karen? I'm afraid to ask the question. I hear you.
So when you mentioned that 17% of the architecture world is only women, how much of that do you think that are the linear aspects and the network of the brain front to back versus side to side, and then the linear aspects of architecture?
I actually think none of that plays into it, to be perfectly honest. If it did, I would say then it wouldn't have been 50% women and men, in school. I think in academia they do beautifully, so I don't think it's that. I think it happens on the job site. I think it's intimidating. There is such a gender issue that we still feel, and I think that's where the problem comes in. And so they start out that way, but they quickly move to graphic design or interiors because it feels more comfortable. Yeah, and that's why I really would love to see this, people start to value the differences so that we can change that. Yeah.
I just want to add a little bit to that research. 3% of leadership are women in architecture, so 17%
Wow.
make it to the career, but only 3% make it to leadership. And the research indicates that the reason women step out is to care for family. And once they've stepped out for that often 7-year time frame or 10-year time frame, they don't feel comfortable stepping back in. That the technology, the computer programs, the careers, and that there are enough young people to replace the women who have stepped out.
Thank you for sharing that. I didn't know that 3%. Whoa.
Any other thoughts? Thank you, Karen.
Thank
very
you.
much.